Hey, what's up, everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to Get Hit with the Truth. So today we're doing the Champions Report on the IBF, the International Boxing Federation, for all titles and champions from 122 pounds all the way to heavyweight. And this is the 2023, recap and what's coming up in 2024. So we're going to start with the... Before we get into that, if you could smash the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. I really do appreciate any and all support that I can get as I continue to build my channel here. So, 122 super bantamweight's where we're going to start. Marajan Akhmadaliev, or Akhmadaliev, whatever you want to call him, entered the year as the undefeated IBF and unified world champion. He would defend the title against his IBF mandatory challenger, former world champion from bantamweight, Marlon Tapilis, from the Philippines in April. And in a shocking upset, Tapilis would defeat Akhmadaliev by a split decision after Akhmadaliev, the first half of the fight, kind of just was looking for one big shot and didn't really put a lot of pressure on Tapilis, and Tapilis was able to outwork him. Close split decision, but Tapilis deserved it and became the world champion. Then Tapilis waited around and to get the big opportunity to fight for the undisputed world title and try to unify all four belts. And this morning, December 26th, on ESPN Plus, he would lose the IBF title to Naoya Inoue, the undefeated monster who had the other two titles in the division. And Inoue would win the IBF and WBA belt away from Tapilis and become the undisputed super bantamweight champion of the world at 122 pounds. So, big win for Inoue. He makes history, becoming only the second fighter in the four-belt era to unify all four major world titles. And now we'll push forward into 2024. So, what will he do in 2024? Well, first up, a lot of people think he's going to fight his WBC mandatory challenger, former two-division champ, Luis Nery. I'm in that camp as well. That's what I believe he's going to do next. After that, it's kind of up in the air. He could fight Marajan Akhmadaliev, the former champ. He could fight him. He could fight undefeated Sam Goodman, who is the IBF and WBO's #1 ranked contender right now. But when it comes to undisputed, they have to go in order, and I'm not sure which order they're going to go in, because Goodman was the mandatory challenger in the IBF before MJ won it for the WBA, but the IBF had a mandatory title fight back in April, and the WBA already cleared the way for Tapilis to fight Inoue for undisputed. So I'm thinking the WBA might be ahead of the IBF in terms of a mandatory challenger, and Akhmadaliev might get the shot before the end of the year. All that being said, I don't think anybody beats Naoya Inoue right now. But I really am interested in seeing him fight Luis Nery and Akhmadaliev, because I think they're definitely better than Marlon Tapilis. I'm not sure if they're better than Stephen Fulton Jr., but I definitely think they're better than Tapilis, and I'm really looking forward to seeing Inoue fight them. So we'll see, but I do think Inoue is likely going to go coast to coast, and the only way he loses the belts is by giving them up by the end of the year to move up in weight. 126 featherweight. Luis Alberto Lopez entered the year as the world champion. In May, he would make an optional defense of that belt against Michael Conlan of Ireland. And a lot of people thought Michael Conlan was going to win this fight, myself included, but Luis Alberto Lopez dominated Michael Conlan, brutally knocking him out with an uppercut in the 5th round to retain his title. Then Lopez would return in September to defend his belt against the always tough Joet Gonzalez in an all-Mexican showdown. This one was a good action-packed fight, but Lopez outworked Gonzalez and scored a hard-fought but deserving unanimous decision win and stayed world champion. Now heading into 2024, what's going to go on with the IBF featherweight title? Well, Lopez already has his next fight signed in early March. He'll make a mandatory defense of his title on ESPN undercard and doubleheader, championship doubleheader, when he battles Rhea Abe of Japan. I think Lopez is going to beat Abe, and then we'll be in optional mode from there. And I think there's very solid chances that Lopez attempts to unify belts, either against whomever the WBO champion is, or even Otabek Kolmatov, who's fighting for the vacant WBA belt, because they're all top-ranked guys. So that's what I believe is going to happen. And Lopez will come in the underdog in those fights. I don't believe Lopez is going to go coast to coast again, but he's a tough-ass fighter, and we should see some good fights, and I do believe unification is on the table for Lopez this year. 130, super featherweight. Shavkat Rakhimov entered the year as the undefeated IBF champion. In April, he would make a mandatory defense of his title against undefeated former champion Joe Cordina. He would go to Cordina's home country of England to fight him, and Cordina would score a knockdown and fight his ass off against Rakhimov in a really good back-and-forth fight. Cordina would edge Rakhimov out by a split decision over 12 and become a two-time world champion. He would try to unify during the year, but he wouldn't, and eventually he would return in early November to take on Edward Vasquez, and what would seem to be a stay busy fight. It was anything but. They went back and forth. It was a good action-packed fight. Cordina at home again, though, took another close decision, this one a majority decision, to retain his title. Heading into 2024, Cordina is actually supposed to be in mandatory mode. But a mandatory fight, he's supposed to be in mandatory mode, but he does not have a mandatory challenger. Shavkat Rakhimov, the former champ, and undefeated Eduardo Nunez of Mexico have been ordered to fight in a final eliminator. They're still going to purse bid and getting that done. So I think Cordina is going to be in optional mode, and I think there's a solid chance he's going to fight former two-time featherweight champion Lee Wood next in an all-UK battle. I think that's likely what he's going to do. Hopefully that's what happens. I believe Cordina beats Lee Wood, but I'm not sure he beats the winner of Rakhimov and Nunez. So if I had to pick, I'm going to say Cordina doesn't go coast to coast, but he could. Anything can happen. He is a solid fighter. Unifying belts, I think, is off the table because he is going to have to make a mandatory, and a fight with Lee Wood is probably bigger than a unification bout could be for him right now. So we got to wait and see. 135 lightweight. Devin Haney entered the year as the reigning undefeated and undisputed IBF and undisputed lightweight champion of the world. In May, he would make a defense against former 3-division world champion Vasily Lomachenko, and would walk away with a controversial unanimous decision win in a fight that majority people thought he lost, myself included. But he would escape with the world titles, and then he would sign on later in the year after attempting to make a couple other big fights with Shakur Stevenson and Tank Davis. He decided to move up to 140 to challenge Regis Prograis for a championship there. Just about a week and a half before the Prograis fight, he opted to vacate all of his world titles at 135, citing that he was not going to be able to make the weight anymore, and he just didn't want to deal with it. So he gave up all his belts, and now the IBF title at 135 lightweight is vacant currently. Right now, what's going to happen for the lightweight title in 2024? Well, George Kambosos Jr., the former unified lightweight champ, is supposed to be battling Vasily Lomachenko in April in Australia for the vacant IBF title. Now, that's not 100% finalized yet, but it looks to be what is going to happen. Now, for all intents and purposes, I don't see why this fight wouldn't happen. I think it's going to happen. I think Vasily Lomachenko is going to defeat George Kambosos and become lightweight champion again. After that, it's kind of up in the air what's going to go down. I believe Lomachenko could fight Tank Davis. I think he can fight anybody, because there's we know Shakur Stevenson has a WBC belt and Tank has a WBA belt, but the WBO belt also still needs to be decided. It's vacant as well. So Loma pretty much has a lot of pull And I think this might be the year that Loma and Tank Davis can finally get together. I do not believe Loma wants to fight Shakur yet. He already was a little skeptical in that fight, and then Shakur looked like trash in his last fight. He didn't sell himself. I think Loma's going to use that, and I think Loma could very likely move up to, or could very likely go after a Tank Davis fight instead. But I do think unifying belts isn't a picture, and I think Loma will close out the year as the IBF lightweight champion of the world. 140, junior welterweight. Entering the year, the title was actually vacant. And the vacant title would be decided in February when undefeated Jeremiah Ponce would battle Subriel Matias. Good action-packed fight for as long as it lasted, but Matias would dominate Ponce in 5 and get him out of there and capture the vacant IBF title. He was trying to face Sergey Lipinets during the year. It didn't pan out. The IBF forced him to make a mandatory defense against Shohahan Ergashev, who was another undefeated, hard-hitting fighter. They went at it. Ergashev poured it on the first couple rounds, and then Matias broke down Ergashev, forced him to quit in his corner after 6, and he would retain the IBF championship. In 2024, what's coming up for the 140-pound title for the IBF? I honestly, it depends on who actually wants to fight Matias. I think Matias has a good chance to beat anybody. I don't think Devin Haney, I don't think Teofimo Lopez will want to fight him, even though Lopez says he offered to fight to Matias, but Matias wouldn't have been able to get ready in time. So Lopez went forward with this February belt. Now, I do believe he could. I also still believe that guys like Regis Prograis and other guys like that might take a chance on Matias, but I'm really interested in seeing what he's going to do. But if he doesn't get the right guys to fight him, I definitely think Matias has a solid-ass chance to go coast to coast, and he's a dangerous-ass fighter, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how he progresses in 2024. 147, welterweight. Errol Spence Jr. entered the year as the reigning undefeated IBF and unified welterweight champion. In July, he finally got the huge super fight for the undisputed welterweight title against Terrence Bud Crawford, and would lose the belt after a 6-year run as champion when he got dominated by Crawford and stopped in the 9th round as Crawford became the new undisputed champion. Errol Spence would invoke the rematch clause in their contract, and while they were trying to negotiate the rematch and when it would take place, the IBF decided to strip Crawford of the title for failure to defend against their mandatory challenger and interim champion, Jaron Boots Ennis. So Boots was upgraded to full champion and ends the year the IBF welterweight champ. Heading into 2024, what's going to happen with the IBF welterweight title? Not 100%. Now that Boots is a full-on champion, I still think some guys might avoid him, but I think he's going to get more opportunity, especially with the PBC. Boots is still going to be doing the Crawford Spence dance until they decide on their rematch and where it's going to take place. I personally feel the fight's going to take place at 154, especially if Undisputed's not on the line anymore at 147. What's the point? I think they'll fight at 154, and I think Crawford's going to give up all his belts. Once that happens, 2 other PBC fighters get upgraded. Mario Barrios, the WBC interim champion with the PBC, gets upgraded to full WBC champion. And then Imanta Stanionis, the WBA regular champion, gets upgraded to full champion if Crawford does that. So I believe Boots is probably waiting around to see what Crawford and Spence are going to do, and then he's going to decide on his next opponent. He does not have a mandatory due right now. The IBF did order a mandatory fight, but Cody Crowley backed out of that because the money was too low for him against an unknown fighter. So as of right now, we don't know who Boots is going to fight, but I do know this. I do believe unifying titles is going to happen for Boots this year, and I also believe he's going to go coast to coast as your IBF welterweight champ. We'll see. 154, super welterweight. Entering the year as reigning IBF and undisputed champion was Jermell Charlo. Charlo never defended the title at 154 this year. Injury kept him out the first half of the year. And then he moved up to 168 to challenge Canelo Alvarez for the undisputed super middleweight title. After being defeated about a month to 2 months later, he decided to vacate his IBF title instead of facing his mandatory challenger Bakram Murtazalayev. Now that the belt is vacant, the IBF has ordered Murtazalayev to fight veteran Jack Culcay next for the vacant IBF title. We don't know when that fight's going to take place. I believe Murtazalayev will capture that world title, and then I think he's going to end up running into somebody with a bigger name, and I think he'll get beat. Because I think 154, there's going to be a lot of stars, and they're going to want to capture a world title and go after unifying by the end of the year. So we'll see. 160 middleweight. Triple G entered the year as the IBF the IBF middleweight champion. I think he was still middleweight champ at the end of the year. In May, actually the belt remained vacant well into the year. Actually, he did enter the year as champion, and he vacated it once they ordered Triple G to fight Esquiva Falcao. Then finally in July, the vacant title would go on the line between Falcao of Brazil and Vicente Gualtieri, and Gualtieri would upset Falcao with a 12-round unanimous decision, even putting him down twice in that fight, and becoming a new world champion. Well, Gualtieri got together with Janibek Alamanhalai in a unification bout in October for the WBO and IBF titles. Janibek dominated Gualtieri, stopping him in 6 rounds and unifying world titles. Janibek ended the year as the IBF and unified champion. Heading into 2024, what's going to happen for the IBF title at 160? Well, Janibek seems to be in talks with his #1 ranked contender, Chris Eubank Jr. That's a big fight. It might be the biggest fight to be made right now in the wide open middleweight division. Both guys seem to want it, so it looks like that fight has the legs to happen. I hope it does. If it does, I think Eubank is going to win, but man, I think Janibek has a good chance. He's a good-ass fighter, and I can't wait to see it. The winner will control the middleweight division, and I believe close out the year as champion for sure, but we'll see. 168 middleweight. Canelo Alvarez entered the year as the IBF and undisputed super middleweight champion of the world. In May, he would defend all 4 of his titles against his WBO mandatory challenger, John Ryder of the United Kingdom. He would dominate John Ryder over 12 rounds to score a one-sided unanimous decision. Then in September, he would defend his IBF and undisputed world title against undisputed super welterweight champion Jermell Charlo of the United States. He would dominate Charlo over 12 one-sided rounds, retain his 4 belts, and he will end the year as the IBF champion again. Now, what is going to go on for the 168-pound title for the IBF in 2024? I believe Canelo is in May, will defend all 4 of his titles against Jermall Charlo, the brother of Jermell, or Jaime Munguia, one of those 2. I think he'll defeat him, and then I think he'll fight David Benavidez in September in a huge Mexican super fight. If that takes place, I think he'll be victorious there as well. And I think he'll either end the year as a world champion, or he might vacate the belts, because at some point, I'm assuming the governing bodies are going to start cracking down. Right now, William Skull is his #1 ranked contender, and there has not been, Canelo only picks and chooses when he wants to make mandatory defenses. So, and all 4 governing bodies allow him to do that. I wonder how long that's going to last. So we'll see. But I still believe Canelo goes coast to coast again as the super middleweight world champion for the IBF title. 175 light heavyweight. The reigning IBF and unified light heavyweight champion of the world is Artur Beterbiev of of Russia. Beterbiev entered the year as the I'm sorry, he's not of Russia. But anyways, be that as it may, he entered the year as the reigning and unified champion. In January, he defended his 3 belts against his WBO mandatory challenger, Anthony Yarde of the United Kingdom. They went at it. Good action-packed fight, but Beterbiev would finally get to Yarde as he was behind on the cards, he would get to him and stop him in 8 rounds to retain his unified light heavyweight championship. He would not fight the remainder of the year as a scheduled mandatory WBC mandatory defense against Callum Smith was canceled due to a retinal issue for Beterbiev. He ended the year as as a champion, and now has now what will happen for the light heavyweight title in 2024 for the IBF. Beterbiev is gonna face Callum Smith. That fight was postponed, and it's gonna happen January 13th. I think Beterbiev is going to beat Callum Smith. That's my pick. That's my personal opinion. But I do think Callum Smith's a live underdog. After that, I think we finally have to see the fight. Dimitri Bivol and Beterbiev for undisputed, I think, is gonna happen after Beterbiev and Callum Smith. I think they're finally gonna get together. They're finally gonna do it. And the undisputed light heavyweight champion will be crowned, and I think it's going to be Dimitri Bivol, and then I think Bivol will close out the year as champion. But we'll see. We don't know for sure, but we'll see what goes down, because I do believe Beterbiev is very live as well and could win that fight. 200 pounds, cruiserweight. Undefeated Jai Opetaia entered the year as the world champ, the IBF cruiserweight champ. He would stay out of action until September due to injury. And then in September, he would make the first defense of his title against Jordan Thompson. He would dominate the 6'6" Jordan Thompson, knocking him out in 4 rounds and retaining his world title. But that would end up being the only successful defense of his reign, as prior to another optional defense in December, on the Day of Reckoning Supercard, the IBF blocked him from being able to defend the title against Elizoro of the United Kingdom, as they said he needed to fight their mandatory challenger, Maris Briedis. Well, he tried to fight Briedis on the Supercard. Briedis wouldn't have been available, but he had a plan in place and an agreement with Briedis for them to fight in March in their mandatory fight. The IBF told Opetaia that if he fought Zorro, then they were going to strip him. Opetaia couldn't turn down the payday because it was the biggest of his career to fight Zorro. He went forward with the fight and got stripped of the IBF title, sadly. And now the belt is vacant, and what will happen with the IBF cruiserweight title in 2024? Well, Maris Briedis, the veteran, is supposed to battle former super middleweight champion Gilberto Ramirez next. Now, that's a tough one to choose. I'm personally probably going to pick Gilberto Ramirez to win that fight, but I wouldn't be surprised if Maris Briedis pulls it off. I really do believe the winner of that fight probably finishes the year as champion, depending on what they decide to do later on. So cruiserweight has become wide open. It's kind of turned over a new leaf, and we've seen some new champions, and these guys pretty much can fight each other at will. There's really no promotions blocking the fight, so it looks like we could see unification in the future of the winner of Briedis and Ramirez, if they truly are the ones that are going to fight for the vacant belt. But if not, we got 2 very good veterans fighting each other for that vacant title. And finally, the IBF Heavyweight Championship. Alexander Usyk entered the year as the undefeated IBF and unified heavyweight champion. He tried to make a fight with Tyson Fury for undisputed, and it never materialized. So finally in August, he would return and take on his WBA mandatory challenger and regular champion Daniel Dubois. After he was winning the fight convincingly, but Dubois landed a questionable belt line shot in the 5th round that put Alexander Usyk down. The referee scored that a low blow, so Usyk was able to recover, and after he recovered, he broke down Daniel Dubois and stopped him in the 9th round to retain his IBF and unified heavyweight championship of the world. He ends the year as the IBF and unified world champion, and in February, he has the biggest fight of his career as he tries to make history against Tyson Fury for the undisputed heavyweight title. And he also tries to become the 3rd man in the 4-belt era to unify and become an undisputed 4-belt champion in 2 different weight classes. Terrence Crawford accomplished it earlier this year in July. Naoya Inoue accomplished it this morning when he knocked out Marlon Taplis. And now Alexander Usyk has the opportunity to accomplish that same feat. Personally, I think Tyson Fury is going to ruin his party, but I do think it's close to a 50-50 fight. But I think Tyson Fury is going to be the next IBF champion. But there is a rematch clause in the contract. And as long as Usyk doesn't get completely annihilated by Fury, which I'm having a hard time seeing that, Usyk has a rematch clause and can invoke it, which I think he will. And once that happens, the IBF has already said if a rematch goes down between Fury and Usyk, the IBF title will go vacant, and their number one contender, Filip Hrgović, will fight for the vacant title. He will fight the number two contender, which it looks like it will be, against the former two-time unified heavyweight champion of the world, Anthony Joshua. Joshua defeated Otto Wallen, who was the number two contender. He knocked him out this past Saturday on the Day of Reckoning card. And he is focused, but the super fight with Deontay Wilder really took a hit and looks likely to not happen after Wilder lost to Joseph Parker in a big upset on that same card. So now Eddie Hearn said the other day that it looks likely that AJ would go after the world title against Hrgović to try to become a three-time world champion. So we'll see what happens. I personally do feel that that's what AJ does, and I feel he's probably going to, I think he beats Hrgović, but I do think Hrgović is a real live dog. But the second half of the year is going to be interesting because it's really going to depend on what's going on with Usyk and Fury. If they do indeed fight again, and Anthony Joshua is the only other reigning champ, then Joshua has his pick of the litter of who he wants to fight and when he wants to fight him. And actually, so does Hrgović. And there's fights with Zhilei Zhang, Andy Ruiz if he comes back. There's some big fights out there. So we got to wait and see what goes down. But I do not believe Usyk goes coast to coast as IBF champion. So that's it. That's the IBF, the International Boxing Federation, the 2023 Champions Report on the IBF world title from 122 all the way to heavyweight. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate any and all support. This is True Boxing. You've been hit with the truth.